Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum. Uh, my name is Zishan Hashim and I am the host of today's session. And today is the 11th session of Pakistan Social Science Forum. And today's presenter is Dr. Sadia Khanam. She did her PhD in Politics and International Relations from Istanbul University. And now she is working as the uh, assistant professor in Iqra University, Islamabad. And means, she is also the member of Pakistan Social Science Forum. So that's why today's session is very important for us. And since some participants are from, Istanbul or somewhere else out of Pakistan, so that's why means we are conducting this session in English. So this session would be in two parts. The first part would be that in that Dr. Sadia Khana will present her presentation, and in the second part there would be the question answer session, and the question answer session would be moderated by Rizwan Ahmed. And in the last session, in the last section, Dr. Muna Khyal will conclude the session and will formally thanks to the participants. So now over to you, Dr. Sadia.
Thank you very much, Zishan. I'm really thankful for the Pakistan Social Sciences Forum as well. Knowing so many people are in queue or with so much good work, but you gave me this opportunity. I'm really grateful. And I'm also thankful to all the participants for their time. Hopefully, we are going to have very good discussions. So starting with my topic, it's not a very easy topic, knowing that we are from that this region, so it's easy to work on this. We have to be very careful while doing research on India or overall South Asia. It's difficult to be keeping our subjectivity aside and then conducting a research. Hopefully I am successful in this. So Indo-US strategic ties and India's preeminence in South Asia. Screen got stuck. Let me check it. Stop sharing. I think full screen is not working, so I'm just starting with this. So knowing that India's overall stature in South Asia, it's a big country with huge population, considerable military might, and in South Asian context, definitely a comparatively higher level of economic industrial development it has achieved over the years in last 2-3 decades. And all these things, all these capabilities and potential somehow created a scenario for India where it is thinking about it, it's dreaming about having its own monopoly or predominance or preeminence in South Asia specifically, and overall globally generally. And it's not new phenomena. It's not linked with only what happened in last 2-3 decades, but of course, these last 2-3 decades created, a totally different kind of situation for India. But these hopes, these desires are not new. Since independence, India under Nehru and later on under Indira Gandhi was dreaming about this kind of status for itself, especially in South Asia. And why I am, putting a specific kind of theoretical framework, neorealism or structural realism, justification comes here that whenever we are discussing India's role in South Asia, we cannot ignore overall power structure, global power structure. It's bipolar, unipolar, or multipolar. And we have witnessed that under unipolar world power system, India actually got a lot of encouragement from the United States of America because of certain reasons. So America's post Cold War period, America and India America relations, strategic ties are very important to understand Indian ambitions in the region and beyond. So theoretical framework I borrowed from the New Realist school of thought, structuralism that we also call it. So it's basically, emphasizing on the system structure, what kind of power structure we are having at international level. It's not about units, it's not about countries. It's about how, it's a bipolar, multipolar, unipolar system. And all kind of systems are having different kind of, aftermath, or different kind of impacts on what state wants to do in its domestic or foreign policy. So structural realism also, it explains the recurring events in global affairs above states, internal politics and economic aspiration, or socio-cultural values and political ideologies. And states have to comply with the inevitability of the international system structure, irrespective of whatever ideology they follow at home. So India, yes, we have we know that India during the Cold War period was, it is still towards Soviet Union, was having a kind of socialist system, not completely 100%, but somehow during Rajiv Gandhi period they started to transform. But during Cold War period, one reason why India was not, forced to or not compelled to be in both poles, in Soviet pole and capitalist bloc of under American leadership, because somehow bipolar system was allowing India, letting India decide on its own. Somehow there was a lot of leverage to decide. And then Nehru, the way Nehru formed non-alignment movement, it was all because of bipolar system. Under unipolar system, there's a lot of stress on the states. Global hegemon decide what kind of system they can have and how they have to create any kind of political, diplomatic, economic maneuvers in regional politics, international politics. Units capabilities matters, and neorealism or structural realism doesn't deny it altogether. Somehow, because if states want to play certain kind of role in the region or globally, it should have certain capabilities, military, economic, political capabilities. So if India is not a stable democracy, it's not possible for India to, build up or develop certain kind of desire to play any important or major role in the region or globally. Similarly, if India is not a stable economy, again, it would be difficult for India to, set up such kind of role for itself. So units capabilities or states capabilities do matter, but overall, it is system structure that actually influences not only what kind of system we want to pursue at home, but also how we are interacting with other states, small or big, with our neighborhood or with other, rising economies or major powers. So the system of the structure determines the outcome of different kinds of interactions among the units. For example, the interaction of medium or small size states is always influenced by the alignment or hostility of major power actors. If Pakistan could play similar role like India and South Asia, it would have been different scenario for India. But now, since a stable economy, stable democracy, and then knowing that the major power in 1990s, sole hegemon, and now a major power, superpower America, is on the side of India, whole scenario has been changed. So major power, if a country is having good ties with major power, sharing same kind of values and interest, then it is possible to build up, preeminence kind of stature or hegemony in the region. Otherwise, it could be difficult. And then states behavior differently in a bipolar system, and the behavior in a unipolar system would be more conscious and flexible to deal with the sole hegemon. So pre-Cold War period, during Cold War period and post-Cold War period, Indo-US ties are exhibiting same kind of situation. In bipolar system, choices were available, interests were different. There are so many other choices, but now in 1990s, under the sole hegemon, only superpower, India had very limited choices how to do its politics, diplomacy, economy. Then there's another important factor that also explains how United States of America and India's relations built up over the years in last 3 decades. It's a counterbalancing theory, knowing that in international politics, some states are, status quo. They're sharing same kind of values, same kind of interest, and others are challengers. And challengers are those states who are not satisfied with the system and they want to change it either, or they want to win some kind of benefits for themselves. So in this scenario, balancing and counterbalancing this all politics of, at global level and then at regional level is very much active. China's role comes here, knowing that India's biggest, competitor in the region this time is China. America's competitor is also China. So it's easier for both of them to build a loose alliance, of course, not a formal kind of alliance, but a loose alliance to counter China. And China, in return, is also counterbalancing then America and India with its own projects, with its own diplomacy, and whether it's with Pakistan or other smaller countries in the region, in broad Asia. So this whole phenomena also explains why India is, getting closer to America in last 2-3 decades. Now coming to measuring hegemony, knowing that yes, military might is very important. It's a potential, or to be a strong economy is another potential. But there are some other factors are also very important. Structural realism is not, somehow covering those aspects of being powerful or being hegemon or creating some kind of predominance. And that's why I actually borrowed some concept of Gramscian theology. Robert Cox's new Gramscian perspective of hegemony emphasizes on a consensual acceptance of hegemony, expressed in the form of admitting and acceptation of the ideology of the hegemon by the smaller states. Now, because there are a lot of criticism on India that, a big population is living below poverty line and people are suffering, and states success is not reaching to the masses the way it should be for a hegemon, a country that has claim for hegemony or preeminence or predominance. So and also there's a fact that smaller countries, even Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, sometimes Maldives and Bhutan also reacting negatively on Indian claims of hegemony in South Asia. Especially in last 2 decades, there were a lot of instances where the smaller countries clearly negated India's claims. So in this scenario, I found this theory more suitable to explain whether India is actually justified in its claims of preeminence in South Asia or not. So Robert Cox considers hegemony a form of dominance, yes, but it involves consensual order. Hence, dominance by a powerful state may be a necessary but not a sufficient condition of hegemony. It should involve consent from the satellite states. They are willing to accept you as a hegemon or a preeminent state. Now coming to actually India's quest for regional dominance or preeminence, knowing that Nehru's approach of synthesizing idealism abroad and realism at home, the example is that NAM, non-alignment movement. Nehru was a very active advocate of third world countries, poor countries, newly independent countries and their rights, and he was against imperialism or new imperialism. But at home, he was a very strict kind of a leader, knowing that if peace at home, then only he would be able to somehow advocate the case of his country, plead the case of his country abroad. So he took all kind of measures to create a stable Indian state, from giving a very progressive constitution, secularism, to whenever there was a need of using coercive means, he never hesitated to carry out that, like what happened in Operation Polo in Hyderabad, what happened in Kashmir. So there could be a lot of justifications for that. Of course, Indian perspective is different, other countries' perspective could be different, but as a statement, that was the best option available for Nehru. A peaceful, a stable country without much conflict, without much confrontation. So he laid the basis, a strong, very strong foundation for a country that could claim hegemony in future. In his speeches, in his statements, he very clearly mentioned that India's role, the role he is imagining for India, dream for India is of, not only regional dominance, but also playing a very active and very important role in international politics. So after Nehru, Indira Gandhi, though again very controversial, because of her emergency and other some policies against minorities, but Indira also pursued regional ambitions of predominance, whether it was military intervention in East Pakistan or annexation of Sikkim. After Indira Gandhi, though a worth mentioning point here is during Indira Gandhi period, America-India ties were not very friendly, not very cooperative, knowing that President Nixon was not having very good ties with Indira Gandhi because of his racist comments on, Indira and about Indians. And also because the way, Nixon decided to provide some kind of assistance to India in when India was going through drought. So America-India ties were not very good, but during Rajiv Gandhi's tenure, Rajiv was again in Indian history, in political history, Rajiv is not given the due place. He was kind of visionary, knowing that now Cold War is going to end in late 1980s. He started introducing reforms, capitalist reforms. So he actually set the tone for India's economic growth and India's development in 1980s. So he continued his policies at home as well. When in Sri Lanka there was a Tamil and Sinhalese conflict, he sent armies there despite a lot of criticism on him. And now after Rajiv, of course, BJP under Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and later on under Modi, it's on the same agenda, creating a whole new kind of opportunities for India globally, and of course in South Asia as well. So coming to US support to India in its quest for regional prominence, knowing that during the Cold War period, their relations were not very cordial, not very friendly, because of so many reasons. Cold War politics, and knowing that Pakistan was in the capitalist bloc. But after the end of the Cold War, the situation changed in favor of India. India introduced reforms, capitalist reforms, LPG model, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. And after that, regional situation also got changed after the disintegration of the Soviet Union and Afghanistan civil war. Pakistan role was not in favor of, was not that America was idealizing in the region. So during the Bill Clinton tenure, later on Bush Jr., India got that, India replaced Pakistan in South Asia. So there are so many statements from different leaders and Indian scholars as well, very clearly mentioning how White House actually changed its policy in South Asia. So new role that assigned to India was to a managerial kind of role to take care of not only its own interest in South Asia, but also of American interest in the region. And again, China factor is very important. 1990s, of course, that was a time when they all started sensing, especially 1995, 96 onward, that China is on rise and China's economy is rising. And China started, flexing its muscles, not only in South Asia, but beyond the region as well. So India-US ties should be seen in this context, that somehow balancing China's rise was seen as a balancing act, and then India United States of America and some other states in the region, they form a loose kind of alliance against China, counterbalancing China's activities and influence in the region. After 9/11, then there was a lot of more opportunities for India to, provide its own narrative of peaceful coexistence and against extremism. So it created a whole scenario where America was very much convinced, and that's why George Bush Jr. provided civil nuclear agreement to India. Throughout Cold War period, India was, denying to sign NPT, but after 9/11, it was very easy for India to convince the United States of America that they are a very responsible state. So now they are able and eligible to sign civil nuclear agreements and take benefits of this agreement. There are some statements from US departments, and then Colin Powell and other administrative people clearly in favor of India, that India is now ready to take its preeminence or hegemonic duties in South Asia to counter China and to favor American preeminence and American hegemony worldwide. Military cooperation is also involved, and somehow it's not only South Asia where America sees India as a hegemon or a major state that can actually help American agenda, but also in a broader Asia, from Persian Gulf to Strait of Hormuz to Strait of Malacca. These sea line of communications that are very important for not only America but also for India, knowing that it's a rising economy, a big population, so their energy needs are enormous. So if these sea line of communications are under their control, then they only could claim their preeminence and their dominance over the region vis-a-vis China or any other power. So this is how they are supporting each other. Now coming to the point whether the Indian claims are legitimate or not. So as I mentioned, Gramscian theory, hegemony is not only required. The requirement of hegemony is not only that you're a big economy, your army is very strong, and you're having connectivity with all regional states. There are some other prerequisites as well, like if you are having consensus of other states, and what kind of society you are having, what kind of system you are having at home. Yes, it's a largest democracy and a secular country, but we also know there are so many problems with different regions, regional politics. It's quite complex, and then a big chunk of the society is living in poverty. A lot of other issues are there, like India is unable so far to resolve its problem with its neighbor country peacefully. And all the client states, whether it's Pakistan or, of course, Pakistan is comparatively a bigger state in South Asia, but even Nepal, Bhutan, or Sri Lanka, they are not accepting and admitting to Indian claims of legitimacy, especially after the rise of China. So its claims somehow seems, not legitimate. Definitely, we cannot ignore that India's, all the time we are only focusing on India's aggressive policies vis-a-vis its neighborhood, but at so many times, India actually provided a lot of assistance to its smaller countries or client states or satellite states in South Asia. But overall, still these states are not very satisfied with India's role in their internal politics, internal diplomatic, domestic politics. So a long way to go. And then China factor, before 1990s, it was possible for India, to materialize its claims. But that time, Indian economy was not very strong. The bipolar system was not favorable in maintaining hegemony in South Asia. But after 1990s and after the rise of China, it's almost if not impossible, quite difficult for China to maintain, for India to maintain its claims and to materialize its claims, since China is providing all kind of assistance to smaller countries, giving them projects, all kind of military and economic assistance. So their dependency on India is minimizing day by day. So I think because of these few factors, its internal complex politics and poverty, satellite states' refusal to accept it as a legitimate hegemon or a preeminent state in the South Asia, and then China factor. It's creating complexity for India to materialize its claims of preeminence or hegemony in South Asia. Thank you very much.